on Pieces of Peace. Nura Laird is a dean, faculty member, and chair of the Department of Peacemaking at the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism in Northern California. She and her co-professor, John Kadra Davies, have designed a unique and innovative model of peacemaking based on the integration of conventional mediation and principles and methods of Sufi healing. In addition to her university, dean, and faculty duties, Nura has a private practice working with individuals, couples, and family members. She is especially inspired to work with families and to guide her clients and students to bring more love and peace to their relationships and to our world. Good morning, Nura.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning on Pieces of Peace.
Thank you, Susan. I'm happy to be here with you.
Nura, you've been a student of healing and Sufism for quite a while now, since I think around the late 70s. What led you into the teaching practices of Sufism and particularly its healing components?
Yeah, good question. I was originally drawn to Sufism in the 70s because of the mysticism, and at that time I was taught Sufi dancing, and so I ended up linking up with a teacher, my husband and I, and we lived in a Sufi community for 8 years and had our children there. And then in the 90s, I met a Palestinian sheikh from Jerusalem who was also a Sufi sheikh, and he carried the light and the presence that I had been seeking all along. So since then, I've been studying with him, and he's the one that launched me into the teaching and the Sufi healing in the prophetic way. So that's how I got into it. He's the one who launched the university and launched me into teaching at the university.
And tell us about some of the basic teachings of Sufism.
Okay. I'll tell you some of the basic principles, and particularly these principles are the underpinnings of the kind of peacemaking that Abdul Qadir Davies and I do. The first thing is the Sufis have a phrase, La ilaha illallah, and it's dedicated to the unity of all creation and God, or Allah as we call it. And that phrase, La ilaha illallah, is like a mantra that we repeat, and it's been compared to the Shema in Judaism. Hear, O Israel, our Lord is one. It's similar, the unity of God. Another very basic principle is that everyone has access to a direct relationship with God. There's no need for any intermediaries such as priests or ministers. Another aspect is that we are all one family under one mother and one father, Adam and Eve. So all of humanity are brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. Another is that each of us carries the imprint of the divine, or the divine light within, as the Quakers would say, and that our innate nature is pure, holy, and reverent, as opposed to original sin. Mm-hmm. And then from this flows a kind of respect or politeness, which is called adab in Islam, in which we strive to treat each other as creations of and reflections of the divine. Mm-hmm. So those are the basic principles that I wanted to touch upon here. And then when it comes to the Sufi peacemaking that we do, 3 more principles. One is the assumption that everyone who is involved in a conflict or in a challenge in relationship has in some way helped to contribute to the situation. And one of the goals of Sufi peacemaking is to help each person find his or her part. The other principle is once each person owns his or her part, the practice of tauba, or return to God, which is a spiritual practice in which each one strives to return to his or her connection to the divine as a way of seeking forgiveness for whatever part they played. And then finally, the agreement part of the mediation is based on a consent process, which is called shura in Islam. And there's a surah in the Quran that's called shura, and in Arabic it means consultation. And it's a way of discovering ideas for solutions and a way to form agreements. that's not very different from conventional mediation.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the basic principles of Sufism and the basic principles of Sufism as related to the kind of peacemaking that we do.
You mentioned in one of the peacemaking principles that it includes striving for the connection to the divine.
Yes.
That seems like a lifelong endeavor.
Yes, we're all works in progress, let's put it that way. So it is a lifelong endeavor, but what we have in our teachings is an outline of what's called the stations of the way, and they're stages of spiritual development that move towards unity with the divine. And so we are progressing in a course, moving closer and closer in proximity, God willing, towards the divine. And even if we don't live our daily life in firm, whole connection, as we're on our spiritual journey, we get more and more glimpses of that connection. And as those glimpses kind of accumulate, like beads on a strand of prayer beads, as those connections accumulate, that accumulation fills our body and our being with more and more light and presence, so that the divine becomes more and more of an intimate factor in our lives. And it is also a lifelong endeavor.
It sounds like an absolutely beautiful belief system.
Yeah.
Sufism has as you mentioned, a mystical dimension to it. Can you tell us more about this aspect of the religion?
Yeah. Well, I think that all the religions share all of these mystical principles. I'll just touch on a couple of them. One is the immanence and transcendence of God. In other words, that there's something that created the universe that's bigger than all of us, that's in a certain way remote and impossible for the human mind to comprehend. The human mind wasn't made to be able to get all around the force of God. It's too big and too incomparable to anything that we know for us to understand. So that would refer to the transcendence. And then the immanence refers to the fact for us, the human heart. The human heart was created in a special way so that it can come close to the divine, recognize the presence of the divine, and not necessarily encompass the divine because it's too big, but come close to different qualities of the divine and begin gradually to embody those qualities in one's being. So in that sense, we could say the divine lives in the heart, but of course it's not actually true because the divine is so much bigger. But we think of the human heart not just as the organ, but as something much bigger than the organ, as a whole field that is actually bigger than the person and can reach across from person to person at any distance and connect with others as well as with the divine. So it's a special creation, the human heart, and we all have it. We all have this capacity. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the mystical concepts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want me to go into
Yes, I'd love for you to.
Okay. Let's see. That there's an unseen world. There's many unseen worlds. And the stations of the journey towards union with God cross through these unseen worlds. And in our teaching, there's basically 4 with many subworlds underneath them. So we have this material world that everybody's familiar with, that we can sense with all of our senses. And then deeper than that and bigger than that and more profound than that are the other 3 worlds. And the second world is called the world of Malakut, and it's the world of the angels and also the dark energies and the devils, and the world of fairies and sprites and nature spirits. And it's, quote, considered an unseen world. However, we really do have the ability to open up our perceptions, our sixth sense, so to speak, to be able to see these worlds, and therefore to be able to see how these worlds are impacting somebody if we're working with them in a healing, so we can learn about the unseen from the person and also have a perception of what's going on in the unseen for that person, so that when we do a healing we can bring in the divine light and presence to impact both. And then the third of the unseen worlds is the world of the soul. It's called the world of Jabarut, and that's the world of the divine qualities, and we call them the 99 divine names that exist from God in their purest form. And our goal as human beings from a Sufi perspective is to attain the opening of all those qualities inside of ourselves, so that as a human being we carry a fullness of those qualities, and that would be the fullest expression of our humanity, and that's the world of the soul. And then the deepest world is what we call the world of the secret, or the world of Lahut, and that's the world of the absolute, the world of God, and it's attributeless, and it's kind of like, in a way, like the unified field in physics, and it's still mysterious for the human mind. Mm-hmm. So in the spiritual journey, we strive, we do practices and pray and try to purify our beings so that we can experience all those worlds.
Beautiful. And Nura, you hold a master's degree in education, and
right.
you were originally trained in early childhood education and teaching.
Yep. Yeah, I've taught all levels, actually, except for, I think, maybe 6th grade. But I've taught everything from pre-K through high school. And I got trained in the early 70s at a very avant-garde university program at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And so I was taught very innovative models of education and went on to start a school with some PhDs that I knew in Vermont that was an alternative junior-senior high school. It was an amazing school. It only lasted for 7 years because of financial problems, because of embezzlement on the part of an administrator. But that was an amazing experience teaching there. And then I went on to start another school with 2 Sufi master's degree women that came out of our Sufi community, and we started a Sufi school for young children that then turned into an elementary school and now includes a middle school, and it's still going since 1977, and it's called it's now called Rainbow Community School, and it's on the web, and it's a model school, and I'm really proud of it. It's really come a long way, and it started out as a very avant-garde model for the community in North Carolina in which we started, and now it continues to be a very avant-garde model, and teachers, I think, from all over the world come to intern there to learn the model. It's a combination of Sufism and some other innovative educational philosophies.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What child wouldn't want to go to a school named Rainbow?
I know. My children went there. It was called Rainbow Mountain then, and when it was time for them to go to college, they said, Mama, can't you start a college like Rainbow Mountain?
I can imagine. On that note, I did want to ask you as an educator, if you could change any aspect of our regular educational system in this country, what would it be?
I love that question. Thank you so much. This is my soapbox. I think the first thing would be, I'd actually written a book about this, and it's in my computer. I have 14 chapters, and I've just never finished it. It would be how we understand who children are, how we conceive of children. And it goes back to the principle in Sufism of our innate nature, that our innate nature is pure, holy, and reverent. And I think that in most of the world, children are seen as little versions of grown-ups. And the effort is to make them to become like us. Kind of. And there's what's missing for me is an honoring of who they really are as they are when we are with them. And that honors child development both psychologically and spiritually. It honors the stages that they're in and doesn't push them to be too grown up before their time, so to speak, but to just help them enjoy the stages they're in holistically, like seeing them as a psychological being, a physical being, a cognitive being, a spiritual being, all of that. And I think if we saw children that way, then we would adapt education to them and to what they need rather than to standards that we as adults impose upon them because we want them to be a certain way. I really trust human nature when it's fostered and loved. And I think in most cases when children are really loved and allowed to develop with a structured environment that really fosters who they are and a varied environment that's very experiential as well as mental and emotional, I think when we foster them in that kind of environment, they grow up just fine, most of them. And actually, to tell you the truth, I was trained originally to teach reading to children with learning problems. So I totally get that aspect of childhood and education. But again, even with those children, they need to be fostered for who they are, too, and for their uniqueness. And when they feel good about that, they learn to read.
That's very interesting.
They learn what they need to learn. Kind of amazing. So I have a lot of faith and trust in God as our creator and who God created us to be.
Beautiful. And the great author, educator, amazing person, Chris Hedges, I recently heard him say that schools today are teaching us what to think, not how to think.
Yeah.
And it's become a major problem in our university system also.
Yeah, that's my children are in their early 30s and they thank me all the time for teaching them to think critically and creatively. I think
Beautiful.
That's crucial. Yeah.
Beautiful. And you have to finish that book. I think your time has come for this. I think a lot of people are questioning our educational system because people may disagree with me on this, but frankly, from the time I was in school, which was many, many years ago, it has not changed.
Yeah.
The whole format is still basically the same.
Yeah. Well, if you look into the history of education, it was really designed to teach people to conform.
Yes.
It's pretty bad.
And it really hasn't, as I said, changed much since then.
Yeah.
And you have extensive training, Nura, as well as experience in community and family mediation and also in teaching and counseling both children and adults. And as a result, you've worked professionally as a counselor, teacher, mediator, and seminar leader. Yeah. It's a lot of hats.
Yeah. It's very fulfilling.
Yes, I'm sure.
I don't see them as separate because for me it's all about healing and helping to restore love and healing individuals and healing relationships so that we can all get back to who we were really meant to be. And from a Sufi healing perspective, we've become veiled, so to speak. We've got coverings over our innate nature, and this is part of the human condition. It's life on earth. There's nothing wrong with that. But the goal of Sufi healing and the kind of relationship healing work I do, or mediation, is to help remove the veils so that we can see. We're not looking through a glass darkly, as Tennessee Williams would say, but we're seeing clearly reality as it is, including other people. So we're not pasting our veils onto other people. We're not projecting. We're not misinterpreting what they say to us, but we're seeing what's in front of us, and then from our hearts knowing how to be with that, how to honor it, and how to be with it in the right way. So for me, what I do is all one thing.
Very beautiful.
Feel separate.
And if you had to choose one of the aspects of your work, do you have one you prefer more than others?
Ooh, that's hard. I think every time I do a mediation, almost every time if it goes well, it usually does, but it doesn't always, my heart smiles inside because of the shift from how the people first showed up to how they end up at the end. But I feel that way with the healing too, and I feel that way with teaching too. It's such a privilege to watch transformation happen before your eyes. It's like watching children grow up, you know, and I see it in myself and I see it in the students in our university, and then you see it in people's lives afterwards, because we always check in afterwards, like 4 or 5 days afterwards, and say, how's it going now? And then they report back, what's going on in their lives and how things are unfolding, and or in their health or in their families or whatever they've been focusing on. And it's super rewarding to see things get better for people.
Beautiful. And as you speak, I'm thinking, you really are, Nura, a transformationist. You actually facilitate that within groups and people.
It's through God, though. I mean, I can't leave out that factor. We're just vehicles, vessels. It's really the divine presence and the divine light that creates the change. And the change isn't really change in the sense that, again, it's restoring things back to the original way it was created.
And you also conduct workshops.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to Seattle in the end of April. My husband and I have been invited there to teach together. And then we're going to Rhode Island sometime this spring. That's in formation right now. And for people who are in the area, we're teaching in Palo Alto. We're going to teach a series of 3 workshops, I think, 3 one-day things. We teach in Palo Alto usually every year. And that'll be focused on building love and relationships in one's life. So if people are interested in getting plugged into the Palo Alto Sufi group sponsors a lot of really neat events that are open to the public. So if people are interested, email me, Nura Laird, NURALAIRD @gmail.com. I hope it's okay that I...
Oh, absolutely. I was going to ask you to do that.
Yeah.
And is there a website that our listeners can go to learn more about this wonderful work that you and all of your colleagues are doing?
The university website, it's sufiuniversity.org, SUFI university.org, www.sufiuniversity. That's where we work, and that's located up here in Northern California, about an hour north of Napa. But all of our faculty travel around and teach, so if people are listening from near and far to your radio station, I can let people know where there might be workshops happening in their area.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nura Laird, thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on Pieces of Peace this morning.
Thank you, Susan, and I'm so appreciative for the work that you're doing through your radio station, spreading such a beautiful message to such a wide range of people. Thank
you. Likewise, Nura. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye now. My guest was Nura Laird, and she is the Dean, Faculty Member, and Chair of the Department of Peacemaking at the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism in Northern California.